Bonjour, bonjour, comment ça va? Ça va bien, merci, et toi? Yes, well, there's some high school French for you. This is Escape from Timberland. It says so right on the screen. And this is by Donnie Grimes. I chuffing love Donnie. Donnie is one of the nicest people. And I often get comments about my voice. People seem to like the way I speak. But I love the way that Donnie speaks. And I'm going to, rather unusually, link down below primarily to a Twitch channel. And that Twitch channel is Donnie's Twitch channel. It's well worth a watch. He regularly hosts all kinds of games. It's rather fun. This is one that he has made himself. It's a mission, it's an escape mission, where it's your job to get out of Tembelan. I don't actually know a great deal about this going in. It is a multiplayer game from 1 to 4 people. There's no revive, it is permadeath. So you die, you're dead, that's it. Game over. How am I going to get out of here? I could just climb out using enhanced movement. Not sure that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Task. Escape point. So, we're on Tembelan Island, which I don't think I've ever played on before. Which makes a nice change. I do like escape missions. Ah, there we go. Door can now be opened. Number 5. Draws and puts away gun. That's a nice little addition. Because normally you have to fiddle around in the mouse wheel menu. Not my favourite thing to do. This uses the Breaking Point add-ons. Donnie is involved big style with Breaking Point, and he knows what he's doing. You might notice the rather nice icons down the bottom of the screen. That's a Breaking Point thing. And it's a terrific mission because it doesn't involve any DLC. So, if you've got friends who aren't so sure about playing Arma and they don't have all the DLC and stuff, well, they don't need it. You just pick this up and get playing. It uses hardly any mods. I like that kind of misty water there. That's rather charming, isn't it? No. Oh, if it is water. I presume it is. Looking at the old Maparoo, yeah. Naval base over there. Should I go there to try and raid it for stuff, or should I head straight for the airfield? I think straight for the airfield. But yeah, please go and check out Donnie's Twitch channel. He's a lovely chap. I've played multiplayer with Donnie on various occasions. I've always enjoyed it, and he's a skilled player. It's one of the weird things, when you make videos and things, people assume that you must be a skilled player. I am not. I'm okay. But people are a lot better than me. Donnie's a lot better than me. I'll say I absolutely love Donnie's voice. The way that he says the O sound. It's just charming. You know, Donnie doesn't say so. Donnie says so. Kind of thing. I can't do it. But it's just beautiful. It's a lovely cadence to his speaking voice and a wonderful pronunciation. So go and watch Donnie on Twitch. Do that. In the meantime, we're going to play Donnie's mission. And I'm sadly playing this alone, although I think it might be quite fun to play with friends. I like escape missions. I've got a video lurking on my channel somewhere of Escape from Chernarus. Escape from Chernarus was an Arma 2 mission. It was rather brilliant. It was like a 100k mission file or something, and that was it. It's kind of similar to this. You break out of a compound and you try and escape. Are we going the right way? Yes, no, sort of. Need to be going more that way. I loved Escape from Chernarus. In fact, I have kept up an Arma 2 dedicated server. for years and years and years just to play that mission. Just pick up and play it. You can be very careful, very sneaky, try and make your way through. Zombie. Or you can pick up a gun and go all out. Well, one of them's seen me. I do have Naz movement on. I am going to use it a bit. Oh heck. Love when you jump over a wall and find there's a whole bunch of zombies. So far, they have just been walkers. Now what is going on? Oh, that I am making so many videos at the moment. Well, you know what it's like about the old lady stand-up comedy routine about buses. You wait all day for a bus and then 3 come along at once. Well, I waited a while for a great mission to come along, and then a whole bunch came along at once. Ooh, that's rather pretty. It's one of the Breaking Point additions. I just so happen to feel like it at the moment. I recently completed a radio documentary because I record so many other people's radio programs. I tend to do my own in big sort of tranches, so I'll try and bang out an entire month's worth in one go. Yeah, what's a note I can opener? And when I was trying to do all of April's radio shows, I found myself accidentally doing a documentary. I did this documentary about the Chinese mission to Mount Everest back in 1960, which absolutely fascinates me because we all know about the first people to climb Mount Everest. I see 1, 2, 3 people. Edmund Hillary and Sherpa Tenzing Norgay. I'm never very sure about this prefixing Sherpa's names with Sherpa. Yeah, I'm not in a hurry to move. I'm somewhat worried about his friends getting off. Surely he's going to go at some point. Hillary and Norgay climbed Mount Everest in 1953. Oh, there's another. And one of the most curious things about it for me is how long it took for someone else to climb Everest. These days, sadly, it's fairly routine, thanks to mountain tourism. Oh, this guy fancies himself. And he's getting covered by his friend, which I don't like. Because I think I've got a reasonable chance of being able to stand up and pop one guy, but not 2. Oh. It's not just one person shooting at me now. So after Hillary and Norgate made their successful summit on Everest, the next group up were German, or were they Austrian? I can't quite remember. So I did so much research for the documentary, and some of it is indelibly burned into my brain, some of it is not. I'm going to reload. I'm slightly worried that his friends who went ahead might have crossed the runway and be advancing through these bushes towards me. You're limping. Did I hit you after all? Anyway, it wasn't the second ascent of Everest that interested me. Yes. You know what, I'm going to reload again. That's a zombie. Thank you. Double. Oh, I was going to say double thank you, but... Can we not get the ghillie? Blast. Right, we got everything. Not many rounds for this. There's at least one guy still alive. Anyway, the third attempt on Everest came in 1960. That's some 7 years after Hillary and Norgay. Oh, I'm glad I shot him. Will that go in there? It will. Repack some magazines. Yes, please. Ching. So, it was the Chinese expedition in 1960 that interested me, and maybe it would interest you. Because what happened there was very curious indeed. Nobody really knew about it. And the thing was, the Chinese didn't really tell anyone until they'd already come back. And there are a few really peculiar things about it. First of all, the people who climbed in the Chinese group were not climbers. Now, it was seen as a desirable thing to do for various reasons, but one of them was in trying to show off communist ideology. So the idea was that ordinary people could do this. I do like a mine. Yes, definitely. So the Chinese deliberately took people who were not climbers and decided that they would be the ones to show off the power of communist ideology by climbing Everest. So that was the number one sort of red flag for everyone at the time. Okay, I'm a little bit hurt. I'm deeply hoping that somebody's got some... no. I'm gonna need some healing. Yeah, the other particularly sort of notably weird thing about the Chinese mission to Everest was, well, AR-10 was when it went. Now they went at the right time of year. But the actual summit attempt was apparently made at night. As the Chinese actually claimed that they summited in the middle of the night at 4:20 in the morning. No one does that. They also went up by the south face. Until that time, everyone had gone up the north face. When I say everyone, you know, it wasn't many people. Right, I'm just wondering if... No. Try some powdered milk, yes. I think zombies that I can't see. When you're climbing up Everest, especially when you go up from the south, there near the top there are what they call 3 steps. What on earth? Oh. Somewhere in a half gilly. Yep. There are these 3 bits near the top called step 1, step 2 and step 3. It's the second step that everyone reckons is really hard. The first step is kind of sort of boulder field at altitude, difficult and technical to climb. The second step is, well, it's actually a series of rocks, big slabs of rock, which are difficult to mountaineer over. And there's one in particular, which is a few meters high, but it's pretty much sheer. Whoa. I think we heard that. Now you might think clambering over something a few meters high isn't particularly hard, and yes, no, sort of. it's not particularly hard if you have the means to do it. By which these days anyone climbing the second step will encounter what's called the Chinese ladder. In 1975, another Chinese Everest expedition placed a metal ladder into the rock face at the second step. That's what everyone climbs up these days. The ladder has actually been replaced since, but there's still a ladder there, and everyone calls it the Chinese ladder. But the guys going up in 1960, there was no ladder. And as a sheer piece of rock, there are no cracks in which to insert pitons or other equipment. There's nothing. Whilst bouldering is sort of an established part of climbing practice these days, that was quite a new thing back then. And it was far from certain that anyone could just climb over this 3 to 5 metre boulder. Ooh. These boxes, are they all the same? Yes, they are. So, when the Chinese said they had climbed the second step without any equipment, and most amazingly of all, one of them repeatedly did it in bare feet. Yeah, people express doubts about that. You don't, when you're at that kind of altitude, you're over 8,000 meters up. The temperature is, well, at the time they were climbing, I think it was minus 37 Celsius. Don't know what that is in old money. Sorry, America. And you take off your shoes and socks to climb a frozen rock face. Really? You do that and you're fine? Seems very unlikely. Now, there are extra bits of doubt in the Chinese account, such as they didn't take any photographs. Nothing. They brought back no evidence that they'd been. You might think that's a little odd. Well, of course, it's the middle of the night. Couldn't take pictures. Right, this sounds weirder and weirder. So, yeah, they ended up coming back, took a few photographs on the way down, but the total number of photographs they took during the entire expedition, apparently 11. Most of which didn't show anything of any practical use in identifying what they'd done. So, would you go up Mount Everest and only take a handful of pictures? Goodness me, no. When they were publishing the official account, this kind of, well, it was a little odd because the official account was very heavily mired in sort of communist propaganda terms. It had been written by a political commissar type, and it was very long on rhetoric and very short on detail. So there was lots of stuff about the glory of the Communist Party, but very little about actual climbing. So consequently, no one believed them. The entire climbing community expressed their doubts very volubly and very publicly, and everyone agreed to amend that the Chinese had not summited Everest at all. There was a chance of further proof later on, when the next expedition up there to make it to the summit was 3 years later. It was an American expedition, they looked for evidence that the Chinese had been there, because in the official account, the Chinese climbers sat down on top of Everest, had a little meeting, and then they left behind a Chinese flag and a bust of Chairman Mao Zedong. They also apparently wrote a note, but with things being so difficult there, it took something like half an hour to write a simple note to list the names of the climbers and the time and the date. They buried these under a pile of small rocks, but when the Americans got up there 3 years later, nothing there. So, were they ever there? Did somebody really climb a mountain with a bust of Mao Zedong in their backpack? That seems crazy. Oh, and an extra fun thing. The Chinese ran out of oxygen on the way up, and they completed the climb without oxygen. Now that seemed unbelievable at the time. No one believed that you could climb Everest without oxygen. It was established fact, as it were, that you could not summit Everest without oxygen. These days, people do. But it took, I think I'm correct in saying it took 25 years for anyone to summit Everest without oxygen after the Chinese climb. So, yes, whilst it is possible, and whilst people have done it, it is far from common, and it was a long time before anyone else made it to the top without oxygen. That's not to say the Chinese didn't have oxygen, they ran out before they got to the summit. And free climbing the second step like that, I think it was 30 years before anyone managed to copy that feat. And as for free climbing the second step and making it to the top without oxygen, no one's ever done that. Well, no one's ever done that since. So, seems iffy as heck. So yeah, absolutely no one believed them. There was an official account published in English in the Alpine magazine, which was the foremost journal of mountain climbing at the time. I mean, it still kind of is, still published today. It came out once a year, and in May of '61, 1 year after the Chinese expedition, there was an account in English given of what had happened. This didn't help. In fact, it's quite telling to read the actual article in the Alpine Journal, because it has numerous footnotes left by the editor, basically scoffing at what they were saying. And yeah, certainly there was some stuff in it which was just, rubbish. The Chinese made, they made great claims about how they were the first to attempt the North Face, something that no one else had managed to do. It's like, well, yes, because the North Face involves a climb that originates in China, and no one had been able to get permission to climb the North Face. So, yeah. It wasn't really so surprising that they were the first to go up the North Face, nor was it particularly remarkable. I do like landmines. So the big question is, Did they go? Well, they did go. They definitely went to Everest, but did they make it to the summit? Ah, well. Now, I've spent some time out that way. I spent time in Tibet, Nepal, that kind of area. I was actually there for Buddhist reasons. That's a separate story. I'm not a Buddhist, never have been, but I have friends who are. And I don't mean your friend Julian, who's got a yoga mat and says he's a Buddhist. I have friends who are Buddhist monks and Buddhist priests, and they ain't white. How? Ah! Blast you, zombies. Come this way and we'll try to literally blast you. Come on, come on. What is wrong with you? Come on. I stumble around like drunken Wookiees, but yes, these mines are dangerous to me. I think Call of Duty. One of the interesting things that I did when I was out that way was I went to Chinese base camp on Everest. Come on. I hate you so much, zombies. I have to say, Chinese base camp is quite amusing to go to. Yes. If you go to the normal Nepalese side to visit base camp there, you will discover that it's quite tricky because the nearest town is very far away and it's rather difficult to make your way to the base camp. You have to trek for days along sort of river valleys and through rock fields and stuff to get there. That's where you really need your porters to be carrying your gear. So you don't go and visit Everest base camp on a whim. Whereas if you go to the Chinese base camp, there's a road. There's a very nice road. And it runs all the way up to base camp. You pull up in your car and get out and go, right, let's climb Everest. And that base camp is, it's actually slightly lower than the Nepalese base camp, but it's still over 5,000 metres up. It's quite interesting if you go there these days because there's a tea shop, there's a little hotel, there's a restaurant, nice big car park obviously, you know, all the comforts of home. Oh, and surprisingly good internet access. So yeah, I went there by getting in a car. which sounds incredible, but that was also true of the Chinese in 1960. Let's rewind a little bit. In 1958, the Chinese and the Soviets were friends. Like, oh, there's a supply. That's what that noise was. I need to get across there. Crossing that water is going to take forever, so I think I'm going to have to go up this way unless I can find me a vehicle. If we follow the coast round. That little place there, yeah. So the Chinese and Soviets were the best of buds, and they were engaged in a number of joint programs and partnerships. One of the things that they decided to partner up on was mountain climbing. The Soviets had quite a history of mountain climbing, and they were very keen to establish various records for themselves. The trouble that the Soviets had was, although they had many sort of formidable mountains in their territory, they didn't have any particularly tall ones. I think there's 14 peaks in the world over 8,000 meters, none of them in the Soviet Union. So the Soviets were pretty keen to head up Mount Everest, and they were pretty keen to do so with the Chinese partners. Hurrah! The Soviets had experience, they had training facilities, they had equipment, they had the lot. So the Chinese would go along as kind of junior partner on this, but they would allow access to the mountain, and it'd be a lot easier to do the sort of logistical support and everything from the Chinese side. Brilliant, win-win. The trouble was that Soviet communism was starting to change at this time. Stalin was dead, and under Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, they were quite keen to sort of de-Stalinize their brand of communism. So Khrushchev gave a speech on the dangers of the cult of personality and stuff, suggesting that the Soviets must never again have a Stalin-esque leader, and the Chinese were extremely uncomfortable with this, because they regarded the Russians as moving away from true Marxist communism. The Soviets were also getting unhappy with the Chinese because they felt the Chinese were being a bit too hard-line about all this and a bit too confrontational with the West. Despite what one may think of the Cold War, the Soviets were very well aware of the danger of any kind of nuclear exchange, regardless of whether it was a large-scale or a small-scale nuclear conflict. So the Soviets were very mindful of that. Oh, great shooting. Great shooting, Tex. So the Chinese and Soviets were starting to have a bit of a argy-bargy. But they still were going ahead with their mountaineering expedition. The Chinese had a particular reason to want to do it themselves, because they were having a bit of a border conflict, well, border argument with Nepal. It wasn't particularly clear where the border between China and Nepal lay at the time. Oh, something on fire. Do we have a compass? We do. It's about 50 degrees. So it's in line out this away. Probably not that far. Well, maybe it is. Let's go and investigate that. Now, at the time, Nepal was claiming that the whole of Mount Everest lay within Nepalese territory, whereas the Chinese were saying, oh, hold on, Everest kind of lies in both our territories. We should draw the border across the top of the mountain, and we should rename it. We should rename it Friendship Peak. I kid you not. Well, the Nepalese were not going for this. In fact, they turned around to the Chinese and said, "Oh, shitty bang bang. Ouch. That wasn't smart of me. How hurt am I? Not very. I should be able to fall down here. Because I'm gonna have to. God, it seems quite far. Should have brought advanced urban repelling as well, eh? Phew. To yourself, quick, quick, quick. Anyway, when the Chinese made their suggestion to the Nepalese had said, "Hey, how can you be saying anything about that mountain when you haven't even been up there?" Sting. So the Chinese were like, "Right, we've definitely got to get up there. Otherwise the Nepalese will be able to slag us off forever." I'm hearing one shooter. Two. He's down. Friend sounds like he's down there. I don't think that was anything aimed at me. Chuff. There's a third guy. Let's just sit things out for a bit. Anyway, the Chinese went off, picked themselves a bunch of people to represent their communist ideology. One of their climbers was a fireman from Dongbei, northeast China. Another guy was a geologist. He was from the Central Plains, but he had just graduated from Beijing Geological University. Although being from the Central Plains, he'd actually never seen a mountain before. Cool, eh? So I started training with the Russians. It was going alright. But as I say, the political friendship between the Russians and the Soviets was starting to fall apart. They had been due, after just 1 year of training, to go up in 1959. That turned out not to be possible because of problems in Tibet. Now, the Chinese had rocked up in Tibet in 1950. Whether you regard that as an invasion or a reoccupation of their own territory, well, it's up to you. Right, slightly concerned that I'm not hearing any more shooting. I don't think it's because the zombies killed them. Maybe. Down boy. Like that hat. That's coming with me. Car, no one's exactly well off for ammo, are they? I did shoot at least one guy. I don't think that was him. Oh, maybe it was. I can't tell. This strikes me as a dangerous area, and I'm getting the heck out of here. Yep, never assume someone's alone. Have a flare. Whew. I saw where your friend went. I'm dead. Oh no. Shall we respawn? I'm quite enjoying this. Yeah, we'll respawn. Doink. Ah, mission failed. All players died. Right. Okay, we're back in. Oh yes, set custom action 9 for auto run. That's actually a feature. It's actually a feature of Ravage. Oh, it was always something I could open. Who knew? Let's see if we can go there. Anyway, as I say, Chinese and Russian, I guess, partnerships were starting to fall apart, and when Khrushchev made a speech formally condemning Stalin and Stalinism, but completely disavowing it, the Chinese were not at all pleased. So they massively freaked out, shouted at the Russians, and it led to the ending of various partnerships. Now, as I say, they were supposed to go in 1959, after just 1 year of training. 1959, well, when the Chinese showed up in Tibet in 1950, it wasn't just China shows up, takes over the end. There was kind of a running series of insurgent skirmishes and protests and uprisings and stuff in Tibet through until 1959. Yeah, the Dalai Lama didn't actually leg it until 59. So yeah, the Chinese showed up in 1950, the Dalai's hanging out in his palace, the Patala, and it is a palace. Doesn't matter what he tries to claim it is these days, it's a chuffing palace. I've been there. But eventually it became clear to him that he was going to have a hard time operating in Tibet. So he disappeared in 59. Now, because of that, and because of the general ruckus in Tibet at the time, it was thought to be too difficult for the Chinese and the Russians to get themselves up the mountain. This is a horrible place to fight. I do not want to fight here. He's not going to miss forever. There's a very limited season for climbing Mount Everest every year. Generally, it's May. So, if you can't make your attempt on the summit in May, that's it, you're done till next year. So, the Chinese have been keen to go up in May 59, the Russians have been keen to go up in May 59. They didn't make it because of the fun going on in Tibet. Somewhere, there we go. Ain't gonna miss forever. I have taken a hit. There's another guy around as well. Get him? Yeah, I think so. Number 3, I ain't so sure about. Alright, long story short, with things being the way they were, China and Russia didn't go up in 1959. They had to reschedule their ambitions for 1960, and by that time they'd fallen out. Now, because they'd fallen out, that left the Chinese to go up on their own. As keen as the Russians were to go, they couldn't go without Chinese help. Back away. I don't want to meet number 3. So, as I say, we're up to, well, it's actually February 1960, and the Chinese have decided, right, we're going up Everest, we're doing it on our own without the Russians. By cracky, we're going to make it. They had one major piece of trouble. They didn't have any equipment. So, oh dear. Now, this was actually a serious problem because they had been training with Russian equipment and they now didn't have access to any of it. So what were the Chinese going to do? Well, they decided they were going to buy a bunch of equipment from the Swiss. And they were going to buy about $700,000 worth by today's money. This was actually quite a difficult sum for the Chinese to spend because it was in dollars. No one was interested in transactions in Chinese yuan, renminbi. So China had to use some of its foreign currency to buy all this kit. Actually, when I say, yeah, 700,000 in today's money, yeah, I think roughly. Hard to say because of purchase parity a little different. Anyway. Now it meant that somebody was going to have to stick their neck out and say, hey, we need this money to buy all this stuff. China had very little in the way of foreign currency reserves at the time, and it had very little foreign currency earnings because it wasn't really trading internationally back then. So when you're spending dollars, that's really costing you. And who wanted to be the guy who was going to go to the big boss and say, we need to spend a considerable chunk of our foreign currency reserves on climbing equipment for a bunch of peasants to go up Mount Everest? It was like, yikes. And it was a chap called, if I recall correctly, How Long. He was one of the 10 marshals, kind of equivalent to a general, really, but one of the 10 marshals who ran the Chinese military. He was already on a bit of a sticky wicket when it came to the big boss, because he had been ordered to investigate a friend of his, Peng, because Peng had fallen out of favour with the top brass in China. He had refused to do so, and he had said, no, Peng's a totally great guy, he's my mate, which had rather blotted Herlong's copybook. So he needed a win, and to suddenly have to go before the big boss and ask for a big pile of cash, not great. But he thought that getting to the summit of Everest would be just the thing. That would redeem him, that would solve everything. Hurrah! So he got the money. Now, they got all this equipment from the Swiss. Great. It's all kit they haven't used before. Not so great. But if you... one of the interesting things when you climb Everest today is, let's say you climb with oxygen. Whose oxygen? That seems a weird question, but you're taking oxygen bottles. Well, where are you getting them? Are you bringing them from home? Or are you getting them out there? Are you getting them closer to the place? Oh, wait a minute, you also want to make sure that the Sherpas and the other guys you're with are familiar with the stuff you're using. So if you take, say, British oxygen cylinders and equipment, what kind of connectors do they use? Are they standard universal things? Well, in actual fact, practically everyone uses Russian oxygen. See, there's a reason why the Chinese want to use Russian kit. And although you would assume that, say, the Swiss or whatever would have the most standard mountaineering kit, in some cases it's not. So, anyway, Chinese got this big bundle of Swiss kit that they've just bought at tremendous expense. They've no idea how to use it. I mean, I'm sure a lot of it was similar to the Russian stuff, but some of it wasn't. It's February, and they are going to have to make the summit attempt in less than 2 months. I saw you. Just a brief flash down there. Zombies are heading over that way. Expect to hear some shooting. I'm not hearing it. Right, it's that way. You can get a bit turned around with all these stairwells and everything. That's it, China starts. They've got their guys, they've picked their team, they're off to base camp, and they're shipping all this Swiss kit with them. They get it all there. They are ready to go, and they start climbing proper. Now, a lot of people imagine that when you climb a mountain you start at the bottom and work your way to the top. This is very rarely what happens. You tend to climb in stages. You don't go from base camp to the top. Our bullets. Think I got everyone? Turns out I didn't. Oh, jeez. all got a bit billety, hasn't it? I'll head down for a little bit. Wait for things to settle down. So, what the Chinese intended to do to climb Everest was to climb in a series of what they called marches. You know, they would head up to a certain point, perhaps establish a camp, come back down, so, you know, March 1, they call it March, a bit of a communist thing, because during the Chinese Civil War, which had really just taken place, and where one of them is that away. There's two of them there. Heavy weapons. So March 1, you attempt to go up a certain bit. They attempted to make it up this sort of glacier bit, and it's not just a case of heading up there. You head up there to scout out the terrain so that when you're going up there properly, you know exactly where to go. You don't waste time route finding. You can also set up a camp where you can start ferrying supplies up there, so that on your next attempt you can start from there and push on. You know, perhaps you only need to carry enough kit to make it to that camp, because there'll be enough there to get you to your next destination. And also it allows you to do things like fix ropes or place ladders. Yes, ladders get used a lot in mountaineering. When you've got crevasses and things to cross, stick a ladder over it. That is often better than just about anything else. Have they moved on? Is it safe for me to go down and loot bodies? There were two shooters over this way. One guy went that way. Run. They're not doing great, but they are putting bullets in my general direction. I don't have a good view of them. That's 2 down. That's shooting coming from behind me. Make a spot. Really? It's perhaps a little that way. Yeah, about right. Amazingly, it's safer to go out there. That's it, the Chinese decided they were going to climb in a series of 4 marches. And it's get out there, establish a camp. Get out there, establish an even higher camp. Shush. And so on until the 4th march should be the attempt on the summit. So all this takes time, and you know, the first expedition setting off from base camp in February, well, you're doing this to try and get yourself to the top in late April, May kind of time. It's like, ooh. So they got the first camp set up, fine. They head off on the 2nd March, which also basically went fine. They got a camp set up, it was great. They were pleased with how it went. I saw you, number 1. Let's just see what happens to number 2, eh? Are you going to come around? I'm not in a hurry. There he is. Oh wow, this gun is so steady. No recoil. Who are you? Of course, this is not a great place to be telling a story, is it? Yeah, the Chinese have been making advances. They've done their 1st march, they've done their 2nd march, they're on to the 3rd march, and that's where things start going wrong. Because on the 3rd march, they made it to what would turn out to be the 2nd step. This is where they have the greatest difficulty. You're actually very near the summit, you're over 8,000 meters when you're at the 2nd step. And they made it to the base, and although they set off in bright shiny sunshine, when they got to the base of the 2nd step it wasn't bright shiny sunshine anymore. It was foul weather and minus 37 degrees, and they hunkered down. They tried to claw out some of the snow that was crammed into the rock face there to make a tiny little hollow for themselves, which they crawled into and spent the night very uncomfortably. And barely survived. Now when they're up there, they weren't just there alone. 21. 52 by 51. Ah, stuff it. Well, I'll hang on to that just now. Oh, that's got enough in it. You're coming with me. Oh, you're definitely coming with me. Yeah. Oh, tough choices now. Don't need that. Brilliant. Now, of the people who had been on this third march sort of climb, a lot of them had a lot of difficulty. There were over 200 people on the Chinese expedition. About 90 of them were climbers, have been designated as climbers at least. The others are kind of support. Now on the third march, about 50 odd people had made it up to this place. Effectively, you've got a sort of forward team who climb up, establish the route, set up a rudimentary camp, then the transport team come up, and the transport team start shipping equipment up from base camp and lower camps up to this newly established camp, because that is going to be the camp from which you launch your summit attempt. Well, having got stuck up there, having had to spend the night in very cold conditions, and you know, let's remember they've not got the equipment that people do these days, so they were stuck out there and it wasn't at all pleasant. When they made it sort of back down to safety, 50 of them had frostbite, including some of the lead climbers, and they weren't going anywhere. In fact, it's quite telling that the account that was written in the Alpine Journal a year afterwards was written by the expedition leader, who doesn't actually mention that everyone ended up getting frostbite, and doesn't mention that he was one of them. He wasn't on the final climb. And that's a pity, because he was one of the actually experienced climbers. So, you know, not great. Right, we need to get out of here. Where's we're actually trying to go? Sort of lighthouse point, yeah. Yoink. So the Chinese suddenly had to make some decisions when it came to their fourth march. They had a series of camps established. So people could go from one camp to the next. You didn't have to do the whole thing in one trip. But when it came to the final summit assault, what would they do? They had already discovered that the second step was going to be chuff and difficult, because that's where they'd got stuck. They'd spent the night there, they couldn't get over it, they couldn't come back from it. They knew that the second step was major trouble. So their final summit attempt was effectively 4 guys. And those 4, they got up to the second step. It is already dark. They have run out of oxygen. So one of them is a firefighter, one of them is a geologist, another is a peasant farmer. I can't remember what the fourth was. And it's now their job to get to the summit. And they've been reporting back to Beijing And at the end of the third march, when so many people were suffering from frostbite and were on their way back to base camp, your adventure ends here. They had been told in no uncertain terms by how long. The guy who Mac wasn't particularly friendly with, who had stood there and said, "No, we do need to spend 700,000 of our precious foreign currency earnings on Swiss mountain climbing equipment." Yeah, he was that guy. He needed a win. So when they reported back to him, because he was also director of the National Commission for Sport at the time, so he was the guy technically in charge of the trip. That's going to take a while. He was the guy who was in charge of the trip, and he was the one who said, "Yeah, we're going. We're totally going to make it. Oh geez, we'd better make it." So he said to the climbers, "Make it no matter what the cost." In other words, if you don't make it to the top, don't come back. And this was not a casual or idle thing to say, because it wasn't just the climbers, sort of heads on the block as it were. It was his. He may be one of the marshals of the Chinese army, but China was not above purging people. They did it all the time. So, there was a very real prospect that if they didn't make the summit on that fourth march, that guy was for the chop. So off they went. And by the time they got to the second step, they'd pretty much run out of oxygen. And they tried to climb the second step, and they couldn't. See, one guy, according to the story, he took off his shoes and socks to climb it. The reason he did this was to try and get better grip. They were climbing in crampons, big metal spikes sticking out of their boots. And with the rock face being so sheer, they just could not get a grip anywhere. There was no crack that he could wedge the spike of a crampon into. So he took off his socks and shoes to get a better grip and tried to climb the second step. It didn't work. He actually fell off 4 times. And if you look up pictures of Everest second step, and you just take a look and you see, would you like to fall off there? Because there's a tiny little ledge at the bottom, and after that, well, there's a very, very long way down. So he didn't make it down. Oh gosh, I'm beginning to regret this, but oh well. I guess it'll give me a chance to finish this story. Let's get my finger comfortable. Right. Now, one of the 4, I'll say, was a firefighter, and he came up with the idea of using a ladder to climb up. They didn't have a ladder with them, and even if they had, they would have no means to secure it. But he said, no, what I mean is a human ladder. I will crouch down, you will climb up onto me, and I will stand up, propelling you up the rock face, and you'll hopefully be able to reach the top, scramble up, and get the rest of us up there. Okay. Now, you have to realise, when you're at that altitude, when you're up over 8,000 metres, you are dying. There is not enough oxygen in the air for you to breathe. And if you stay there for any length of time, all other things being equal, you are dead. Call it the death zone, whatever. But just hoisting someone up a rock face is going to exhaust you to the point where you could die from just sheer exhaustion. He's a big, strong boy. He's from Dongbei, the northeast of China. People are reckoned to be very tough around there because they have extremely cold winters and very harsh weather. So he's He's the biggest and strongest of all of them. He's a firefighter, so, you know. He has hoisted people around before. Can he do it now? Well, he did. And he got the barefoot guy up to the top of the face. The barefoot guy managed to pull a couple of others up, but they couldn't pull the firefighter up. He was done. So he sat down and said, "You guys go on to the top. I'll wait here. See you when you get back." Now, it had taken them so long on the second step. I think they said 9. Actually, no, I don't want to say numbers because I've forgotten. But they'd been there a long time. It is dark already. Once you get up above the second step, you've still got the third step to go, but it's relatively trivial after the second one. It is again a sheer rock face to climb, but it's not nearly as hard. The second step's the killer. Alright, that's not to diminish the first step either. The first step's really hard. You find the greatest number of Everest climbers die around the first step. So they left him behind and they pushed on. And once they got up past the third step, they're onto the kind of snow pyramid at the top of Everest. There's a ridge line that runs along. They head along that, they make it up to the summit. In fact, there's a funny moment in their story where they make it to the summit and then realise that it isn't the summit. But practically no one else has been tricked by a false summit on Everest. Why is that? Oh, because they've gone during the day. Because the Chinese were there at night, they didn't realise necessarily where the summit was. So they climb this bit that looks like the summit, but then they realise in the background there's another bit that's even higher. So off they go. And they apparently finally made it to the summit of Everest. Whether they actually had that political meeting in the press release, unlikely. They probably wrote the note. Did they have the bust of Chairman Mao with them? Maybe not. Seems a bit iffy. Chinese flag? Probably. And that was that. They then turned around to go back down. And when they got back to the second step, they found the fireman is still there, and he has sat there the whole time without oxygen, because he reckoned that his mates on Summit Push were going to run out, and that by the time they got back to him, they were going to need it. So he had kept the tiny amount of oxygen he had left to give to them. Sad, isn't it? You know, absolute spirit. They do recount in various versions of the story of this happening. They do recount this and how they all cried. I think that's probably true. The kind of official account that we all have is the one from the Alpine Journal, written in English by the expedition leader. But there were several accounts being published in Chinese over the years, which generally haven't been read over here. And they vary considerably. But one thing that's in all their accounts is this bit. And then another reason why the official account was not believed is because at this point they just say, and then we went back down the mountain to base camp. Like that, like going down was nothing. You might think that mountain climbing is all about making it to the top of the mountain. But many climbers are smart enough to regard the top of the mountain as the halfway point, because more people die on the way down than on the way up, because the desire is there to reach the top of the mountain. And you can easily put yourself in a position where you can reach the top, but you don't have the energy to make it back down. And that's when you die. So it's no small thing. Alright, it's not bad now, we're almost there. It's no small thing going back down the mountain. But the Chinese account of it is that, and then we went back down the mountain. The end. It's just, okay. It may well be that this report was written by a political functionary rather than one of them. Whee! Isn't that pretty? Sorry, this bit of the video is boring as hell, isn't it? Aircraft. Supply drop cited as being there. Is there a new one? Oh, there's the escape point. There's boat for escape. Oops, get to the surface. Uh-oh. I've never been very good with the swimming stuff in Arma. Oh, health teeth. Do not drown. Oh my goodness me. Cute. Oh, chuff. I chuffing drowned. Well, I think we can see what kind of a mission this is. It's rather fun, even though I've just done craptastically badly at it. Oh, I never even got to fire that big gun. I can't believe I drowned because I couldn't remember how to swim to the surface. Oh, jeez. Well done, me. Well, at least I finished my Chinese Everest story, because that is what happened. Now, as I say, at the time, no one believed them. No one. Now, some 60 years later, everyone believes them. Why is that? Well, Chris Bonington, a British climber, a British mountaineer and multiple Everest summiter, he went and hung out with the leader of the Chinese expedition. And he questioned him extensively. And remember, by this time, Chris Bonington has been up Everest more than once. And he talked to the guy about this, and he said, yeah, for sure they went. They just know too much. You know, every detail that they say checks out. And interestingly, obviously, at the time when they went in 1960, and the time when their account was published in 61, no one else had been up the South Face route. People have since been up that route. And although the Chinese official account is very scant on detail, every detail they give is correct. So, there is no doubt that they did actually go. Some American climbers sought out the barefoot guy. They did actually find him, and they sat down with him and said, so, you climbed the second step barefoot? And he went, yeah. I said, how? He said, oh. And he took his shoes and socks off, and where his toes had been, they were just stumps. It was not without consequence. And so, yes, in 1960, China climbed Mount Everest with completely inexperienced climbers, with equipment with which they were not familiar, with not enough air, and they free climbed the second step. Wow. It also meant that the border between China and Nepal does indeed pass over the summit of Mount Everest. And that's because of them. It's a very interesting story. I would love to make a video of it, but I just can't because I don't have the footage to be able to tell it properly. And there's no way I'd be able to. I'd have to go to China. I'd have to spend months interviewing people and things. But one day, someone will do a nice documentary about that. We've reached the end of the mission. I'm sorry I've had to witter a blank screen for a couple of minutes. But we're done. This is Tembelan Island, or rather this is Escape from Tembelan. It is based on Breaking Point. It's 1 to 4 players, multiplayer. It is by Donnie, I love Donnie. Please go and watch Donnie's Twitch channel. That's listed below. Please leave Donnie a message of support on the Steam Workshop page. And, I say, go and watch Donnie's Twitch channel because I think he has the most beautiful speaking voice. I'm not kidding. I'm not being sarcastic or ironic or anything like that. I love the way that Donnie speaks. He has such a mellifluous tone. It's just beautiful. I could listen to Donnie talk all day. So, that's the end of this. And until next time, ta-ra.